So can you introduce yourself?
I'm Stef Adriaenssens, associate professor in the Department of Economics of KU Leuven in Belgium. And my main research interest, and I hope expertise, lies in hidden populations and informal economic activities. Basically, I'm trying to research anything that is hard to reach, that is hard to measure and hard to quantify. I should add that all of my research, or virtually all of my research, is quantitative, trying to combine data collection with more or less advanced econometric and statistical techniques.
And for how long have you been working on sex work?
That must have been something like 15 years, maybe a bit more. We started doing research because of our interest in the informal economy. Doing research into sex work tends to take a life on its own, looking at working conditions and safety in work for sex workers, doing some economic work on how wages and risk-taking are interrelated. We also did some work for the National Accounts Institute in Belgium, so trying to estimate how much turnover there is in the whole sector of not all commercial sex but prostitution specifically. We have been working on working conditions and quality of work, as I said, some more, and also done some evaluation of the recent Belgian decriminalization of the prostitution law. So in Belgium, since a few years, in principle at least, sex work has become decriminalized, which I think in Europe is something, well, or at least it's quite an outlier. There's not too many countries following that. That's still under construction, you could say. So the law is not much more than a declaration of principle. Sex work is entirely legal now, as it was before, but also any third-party service can be legal under certain circumstances. In reality, as we always see a big gap between the law in the books and the law in the streets, it isn't any different, or it is very much the case in sex work. In reality, we see that the results are still modest, although many people do feel liberated in a way. It's hard to put our finger on that or to have robust data about that, but at least anecdotally and qualitatively, we see that many people in the sector feel liberated and try to find a way towards the formal economy. It's still going at a pretty slow pace, but at least the principle is there.
And in your research, are you used to work with people who are activists or sex workers themselves?
Well, am I used to work with? At least I study at the very least what sex workers do, but I should maybe expand a bit on the data we very often use. Sometimes we do direct observations of what is taking place in red light districts and so on, but that is rather exceptional. So what we do quite a lot, as I mainly or only do quantitative work, is make use of existing data. That does not require any interaction with people in the field. It has a number of downsides, so there's no debate about that. The big advantage for us is that these data are very rich and very powerful. So what I do a lot is make use of internet data, so crawl data from the internet, or work together with some providers, entrepreneurs that are working on internet platforms and so on. This data is either what clients report about the interactions they had, or what sex workers themselves or their organizers advertise on the internet. We make a lot of use of that. In the margin, though, it's very hard to do research as a non-sex worker without talking to sex workers or other people involved in the sector. So I do that quite a lot. I'm pretty used to that, I think. It makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense in any field of research. So even more in a field of research where people from mainstream society don't have any natural connections to. Of course, I'm brought up with all the cliches. As a student, I used to live a few years in a red light district just because it was cheap and close to the university. So I have that kind of very far off, maybe not in distance, but at least in social distance, very far off experiences. But for the rest, it was due to the research, or thanks to the research, that I had quite a few contacts with activists, but also sex workers. or sex worker activists, all three of them, that helped me tremendously to understand better what is going on and to orient my research.
And can you tell me why you came today to this event, Dignity for Design, and what were your hopes, your expectations?
Yeah, why I came, that's pretty simple. I was invited to present my research, and I think that's also a very good rationale, of course, as we take data and report about a certain sphere of life, certain activity, in this case sex work. It makes a lot of sense that you should give something back to that community, if you can call it a community or network or a group of people. So reporting about my own research, I think, is something every academic should do, even if you're not an activist yourself. So that's the first and let's say reason. Second, I think I get something out of that too because it's interesting, not more than interesting. It's important not just to report about what you do, but also to listen to the reactions, what people think about that. Activists, sex workers, fellow academics, all of them are pretty important from that respect. So I get that back for free.
And how do you imagine the future of your research?
In the field of commercial sex, I still have plenty of projects to work on. In the best of worlds, we would have something of the perfect ethnographer come together with the perfect econometrician. What I mean by that is, on the one hand, to do this kind of research, to do research into sex work, you need a big sensitivity and a big knowledge of local circumstances, not just sex work in general, very different depending on the location. I'm trying to set up research in different locations, also in the global south, and each time you start, it looks as though you have to start over. There's some commonalities, of course. People are trading sex for money or for other advantages. Those things come back every time, but the circumstances are entirely different. So understanding what is happening, having the ethnographer's eye or the anthropologist's eye and knowledge of local circumstances and contexts is crucial. On the other side, what I see is that most researchers in sex work don't have the expertise, or are sometimes not even interested in, but certainly the former, don't have the expertise to collect systematic quantitative data and to report about them. Combining those two at some level of accomplishment is basically what I try to do. Bring together those two fields of knowledge and try to get to know something about that. One of the things I also often see lacking in Western discussions is that sex work, commercial sex, is a global phenomenon, and we shouldn't close our eyes for what is happening in the global south, in middle-income countries, in low-income countries. I don't want to go into cliches, but very often the exploitation and the needs and the vulnerabilities probably are, on average, more pressing in many of those countries and contexts compared to the West. That doesn't mean that this research here and now is irrelevant, to the contrary, but I think we never should forget the rest of the world in that respect. Try to create spillovers in knowledge is one of the things we might, in knowledge, in methods and all that, is one of the things we might try to accomplish, and certainly that I try to bring to the table.